Hi, my name is Enrique, and I'm here to take the mystery out of cooking. What we're going to do is basically a one skillet meal. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the, I'm using an electric range here because that's pretty popular here in the Philippines. I'm basically going to turn it on medium. First thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of oil. You can use vegetable oil, whatever kind of oil you want. I'm using coconut oil just because it's so easy to get out here. And it's supposed to burn at a higher temperature without scalding. So it's a good oil to cook with. And essentially you don't need a whole lot of oil. You know, we're putting maybe about, I'd say 2 tablespoonfuls right there. And now, right now while it's on medium, what we're going to do is we're going to begin with some onions. Now, one basic rule about cooking is you want to start with this kind of a meal. You want to start with the kind of like the bitter stuff first. So you start with, if you're going to use garlic or onion, you start with that in the beginning with the oil as well as the meat. And then what you do is you add your vegetables, stuff that doesn't take as long to cook, you add it towards the end. If you throw everything in at once, what happens is the vegetables get overcooked and soggy, and it actually depletes some of the nutritional value. Now this time I'm kind of cutting the onion in slightly bigger pieces because I really like to taste the onion. And I'm just putting it here with the oil. And again, it's on a medium heat right now, only because I want to buy myself some time as I'm cutting things up, like that. And I always have a hand towel nearby, just kind of keep my hands clean. And of course, cutting table. Another little thing is you want to keep your fingernails forward while you're cutting. And once you get to the point where it wants to tip over, you know, just flip it over and cut it that way. That way you're, you know, you're not going to end up cutting your fingertips off. Next thing will be some garlic. Anytime I'm cooking meat, pretty much garlic and onion are part of the recipe. It almost seems like you just can't really cook meat without garlic and onion, for me anyway. I like the taste. Some people, I don't know, maybe they're allergic to it or whatever, but I love it. And I'm just kind of, the garlic I'm not too worried about. I'm just kind of cutting it in pieces about that big. It's going to fry in the oil, so it essentially, when it fries in the oil, it doesn't taste bitter the way you think of it, you know, when it's raw. It actually gets a really good taste to it. I think so, anyway. And I'm just getting the husks off of the garlic, like that, twisting them off. And as I mentioned in the other video, you can just get a big jar of pre-minced garlic, and it makes your life just a whole lot easier. And it's got all the juice and everything, so it's very fresh. It's either fresh garlic or minced garlic. That's really, for me, the only way to go. Now, if I was going to make chow mein, what I would do is I would cut these into little 1 inch by 1 inch squares, roughly the size, you know, that you want to eat it at, you know, as you're hitting it with the fork. But I'm not making chow mein. We're going to make sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, kind of like a spicy teriyaki kind of thing. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to take this chicken breast and cut it right down the middle. And I'm going to lay it right on top of the onions. Now that I've got my onions all cut up and in there, I'm going to go ahead and crank it up to high. Okay, I'm going to put that there. So I've got 4 big pieces of chicken basically laying on top of there. This is about roughly half a cup. I'm not going to put all of it. I'm going to put like maybe 1/3 of a cup of water. And even though there's oil in there, this is basically just to keep it from dehydrating. And we're going to stir that around just like that. Put a lid on it. Now, you might think having a lid on it really makes no difference. It makes a big difference. What happens is that little bit of water is now going to turn into steam. And you can see it's already clouding up the inside of the lid. So that steam, if you've ever stuck your hand into hot steam, you know that it really gets hot. So if you didn't have a lid on it, you'd be cooking it from the bottom, but the top would be cooking very slowly. But this way, the heat and the steam is really going to cook it from the top as well. So it really does make a difference to have the lid on it, especially if you got a little bit of water and oil down at the bottom like we do here. Plus, if you get a glass one like this, you can get a general idea of what your food looks like while it's cooking. Now I'm just going to kind of wipe off the cutting board for a moment. And if you notice, I'm using a paper towel. You don't want to use cloth because those little bits of chicken stay in the cloth, and it doesn't take long, pretty much overnight, and it's going to really stink really bad. So anyways, you just paper so you can just toss it out. I don't know if you can see it, but right here, right through the glass, you can actually see how the steam is already turning the chicken white on the top just from that heat. It really is hot. It really does make a difference to have it covered. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take some potatoes. I got potatoes and carrots. They came together. It's already pre-peeled. If you get them, with the peeling still on it, just get yourself a potato peeler. And now the size, here's another rule about basically cutting up vegetables. You don't want to have some of them small, some of them big, and get all creative and make little shapes and cut them into things. What you want is consistency. You want to have them all roughly about the same size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go for all the pieces being roughly this size. All of them this size. That's what I'm going for. Okay? Because if you have them all the same size, and again, potatoes take a while to cook. If I was going to put in, let's say we were doing a stir fry, I wouldn't be putting potatoes, number one, but I wouldn't even be putting in any of the vegetables, like for instance the cabbage and the softer items, the pichoy and whatever. I wouldn't be putting those until the very last. You'd want to have the meat cooked. But potatoes are a bit more dense. Essentially, if it's dense, put it in early. If it's leafy and thin, put it in towards the end. Okay. And again, this is sort of like, I don't even have a name for this dish. It's not really Asian and it's not really American meat and potatoes, but it is a one-pot dinner. We're getting this going. In fact, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on getting a couple of carrots in there. Carrots are pretty dense, so you want to get them cooking. And again, I'm going for, as best I can, getting them all roughly the same size. Okay, I've gone ahead and cut up a bunch more potatoes and carrots. I've got the onions on the bottom, a little bit of water. In fact, I'm going to add just a little bit more water. Not a whole lot, because we're not making soup. I just want the water to make some steam. The oil is what's going to keep it from sticking to the bottom of the pan. Now, while this is going, in fact, I'm going to put this on medium for right now, again, to just kind of buy myself some time. Now what I'm going to do is make a sauce. If I just left it like this, it'd be pretty bland. By the way, if you just don't want potatoes, can't get potatoes, whatever, you can substitute sweet yams for the carrots, and you can substitute squash for the potatoes if you're just more into squash and all that. So for the sauce, I'm going to go with a pre-made teriyaki sauce as a base. That's going to be what I'm starting with. So I'm going to put about, I guess about 3/4, I guess about that much of a coffee cup in there. And then I'm going to add a bit of spiced vinegar. Now, let me see if I can get this under there. If you can't get hold of this, there where you're at, let me see if I can get that better. Turn it this way. There you go. If you can't get this, you can either find it in Asian markets. It's basically spiced vinegar. You can do it yourself. Just take a regular vinegar jar, empty out a little bit, and then put a whole bunch of chilies in it. These ones have the little small chilies that are common around here, but you just let it ferment in there. You know, the chilies kind of put there, and I'm letting a couple of chilies just kind of fall in there. And I don't want to get too carried away with the vinegar, but it's basically spicy vinegar. So we've got teriyaki, we've got a little bit of vinegar, and I'm going to take a little bit of brown sugar, and I'm going to get about that much. Maybe actually, we're talking about maybe two tablespoonfuls of brown sugar. And that's going to add kind of like a little glaze to it. And the reason that I'm mixing it up in a coffee cup and not just pouring it in there is because I want to take a fork and get it all kind of neatly mixed up. Otherwise, it would just kind of, you know, you'd end up with sugar in some places and not in other places. Okay, so now a little bit ago I went ahead and added the sauce here, and I'm just kind of letting it, you know, slow cook. The steam again is cooking from the top, so we're all good there. And I'm basically going to just leave it on low for about 20 minutes. I'll come back in a little bit, I'll flip it over, and then if we have too much juice, we can do what's called diminishing by just taking the lid off and letting a lot of the excess liquid evaporate. And then it concentrates the flavor in less amount of liquid. And it's kind of a simple little trick. But what we're going to do for now is just let all that juice get into the potatoes, the carrots, and the chicken. And meanwhile, there's a layer of onions and garlic on the bottom, just sort of cooking up and getting their flavors into the chicken. So we'll come back to this in a little bit. I'll give it about 20 minutes here. Okay, now we're ready to take the lid off here. By the way, if you're cooking something that's like not fried chicken, you know, fried oil, when I take the lid off, the condensation is on the inside, and I just kind of let it drip right back in. But if you're taking the lid off and you're frying chicken, or you know, you got a lot of hot oil, say you're making like a hot stir fry or something, you want to take it off, keep it level, and move it over, because if the water gets into the oil, then you get spattering and it gets all nuts. Anyways, so now after about 20-25 minutes, it's been pretty much soaking in the sauce on the bottom side. You can see some of the onions have stuck to the chicken. And the potatoes, you can kind of poke them. Yeah, they're pretty much done. Same with the carrots, they're nice and soft. Again, you don't need to be flipping the chicken over every 2 minutes. You just need to flip them over one time. You cook it halfway through on you know, one side, then you cook it over on the other side. In fact, it's already breaking apart because it's just literally that tender. It's really good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of let leave the lid off and do a little diminishing. Like I mentioned before, just let some of the water evaporate, so that basically all that's left behind is some of the oil, the you know, different flavors that we added to it for the sauce. You know, you get basically a tastier sauce by letting the water evaporate. And that's pretty much it. At this point, you're ready to just serve the chicken breasts on a plate, you know, scoop up some potatoes and carrots. This is the basics. I mean, if you guys can just get this down, you can get really creative with it. Again, if you're going to put in leafy, like cabbage and other things, you want to do those more towards the end when the meat's already done. Another thing is you can, like I said, substitute sweet yams. But another thing you can do is just kind of get creative on your own, and you can put in, for instance, cashews. You can put in peanuts. Another nice thing to add, but do it towards the end, is big chunks of chopped pineapple. But again, do it towards the end. That way it still has the sweet taste to it. Because if you put the pineapple at the beginning, pretty much the sweetness is going to get wiped out by the time it's done cooking. Other things you can do is you can put in a large jalapeno pepper, just slice it in half and put the whole thing in there, and it'll give a nice jalapeno spicy kind of taste to it. I don't really know what to call this dish. Like I said, it's just something that I like. It's sort of something I came up with here because adobo includes black sauce, soy sauce, and vinegar. And this is more teriyaki sauce and vinegar. So it's kind of a, I don't know, a fusion between Japanese and Filipino. It's just sort of a teriyaki adobo, I guess. I don't know. But the beautiful thing that I personally like about it is there's no bones. Again, we deboned it in the previous video, so you can just, you know, enjoy and not worry about coming across a little bone shard or anything. There's, you know, zero bones in this. So there you go. You got a nice simple meal. Didn't take a whole lot of babysitting. You cook it on low. Really, you can't burn it unless you forgot about it for like 2-3 hours, because the sauce is going to keep it pretty moist. I suppose, yeah, maybe not 2-3 hours, but you know, you'd pretty much have to totally forget about it to really screw this up and burn it. So anyway, so that's it, and hope that made things a little bit easier. And again, just change it up the way you like it. You might want it spicier, you might want it sweeter with a little bit more brown sugar. May want to swap in again some nuts and different things to you know, more your taste. But basically you begin with the boneless chicken breasts. Start with the onions, the garlics, all the bitter things. You can also use bell pepper. I prefer to put a big, almost half or quarter chunk of bell pepper so that I get the flavor in, but I can easily separate it because I don't really care for bell pepper to eat it. Anyways, there you go, and we'll cover something else later.